Hello, I'm George Abernathy, the proud president of FreightWaves, and this is Supply Chain Update. I'm really pleased to be here in Freight Alley, right here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'm joined today with one of the industry leader inside of that cold chain, inside of something we don't talk a ton about, inside of the temperature-controlled world, Greg Reinauer, who is the president of the Tom Lange Group. Greg, thanks for doing this. Welcome to Freight Alley.
Thanks, George. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know about the Tom Lange Group, and I know that people in the world of fresh transportation know about the Tom Lange Group, but I think there's some folks that may be watching now that might need a little bit of a refresher on that. Would you give us a little bit of an idea of how significant the Tom Lange Group of businesses are?
Sure. We exist over three different elements of the supply chain. Lange Logistics being our transportation services, 3PL. Tom Lange Company, which is in-market distribution of fresh produce. And then 7Cs, which is the production and supply of produce, growing, shipping, and importing, exporting operations.
Gotcha. So you're based out of St. Louis.
Yes.
But there's multiple facilities around. Let me take a quick step back and introduce the viewers to Greg a little bit and why they should be listening and interested in the significant background that you have and why it makes so much sense for you to be operating and managing this really interesting business that you've got. Tell us a little bit about Greg.
Okay, thanks. I don't know that I'll give you a good reason why you should be watching,
I think
but everyone can make their own determination there. I've been involved in the produce industry all of my adult life, since right out of college, and worked in many different facets of the business, from the grower-shipper side to distribution, broadline food service distribution, and all the way through that process. Certainly logistics was a big piece of making sure that our businesses flowed efficiently, including working for a company that we actually ran our own trucks in the produce industry for a number of years. So I got to deal firsthand with driver recruiting and keeping those guys happy and moving.
So let's stick with that. In the world of fresh, in the world of produce, and as you go from 7Cs up through the totality of the supply chain that you guys are impacting, let's talk about what we talk a lot about here at FreightWaves, about drivers. How does Lange Logistics, how do you view and deal with driver situation as we have right now and through the pandemic? Is it the same inside of the world of fresh and produce as you're seeing outside of that?
Yes, I mean, driver recruitment, carrier recruitment, and driver satisfaction, if you will, is very important to us. Without the driver and the carrier, it makes our job very difficult. So have we changed through the pandemic? I would hope not. I think we've always focused on treating our drivers and our carrier partners as with as much respect as we can, and doing everything we can to make their lives easier out on the road. The produce world, as I'm sure you're aware, making multiple pickups and drops and waiting at packing sheds where product is coming in from the field can present challenges. And so that's part of the service aspect of our business. Is we want to understand the timing for those events so that we can help make the drivers have an easier time picking up and making deliveries ultimately.
Do you see the same kinds of challenges? It sounds like it's a very time sensitive, and obviously with produce, with it being fresh, it's going to be. Does the driver turnover issue hit as much there? Because once a driver understands those issues, boy, you want to retain them. You want to keep them inside that network. Do the carriers inside of the network that you work with, are they able to keep their drivers longer than you might see in a typical over-the-road dry van truckload carrier?
George, I don't really have any direct data that would support this, but it appears as though week to week that we have a very consistent pool of carriers and drivers that are maintained. Now, through the pandemic, not being out in our offices and hearing the day-to-day chatter, I don't have a clear picture on how many of these drivers that we've lost through the pandemic.
Right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. We saw different industries get impacted very, very differently. The automotive folks shut down for a number of months. Retail, from an e-commerce perspective, boomed and continues to boom. Were there any during the pandemic impacts that occurred inside of your business and what you saw? And are there elements of that that have carried forward after the pandemic?
Well, immediately we saw a shift in business from some of our traditional food service entities and a spike on the retail side. So
Right.
we did see a shift in business based on consumer buying patterns. So that was one piece. Business in general continued to do very well, through the pandemic. Not only do we handle produce, but we also haul health and beauty products. We hauled a lot of hand sanitizer through the pandemic. So we have a fairly diverse base of customers and products. It's all refrigerated, frozen
Right,
freight,
right.
but within that chain, we move a lot of different products, not just produce.
Now that niche, that refrigerated, frozen, temperature controlled, is quite a significant niche, and of very customer sensitive. And you talk about it continuing to grow. How are you enhancing that growth, or where's your investment coming from to make that growth even more significant?
Sure. Our focus since the company was established in 1960 has always revolved around customer service and satisfaction. And in our world, whether it's transportation or produce, we feel like we have several different customers to take care of. So, our shippers are customers, our carriers are customers, and then you have your final distributor who is also a customer. So we've built our system around service, around having everyone within that group receive an experience that makes them want to come back and perform their respective function, whatever it is. And with transportation, we really focus on that interaction and that contact with all people within that chain. And then on the technology side, we're finding ways to use technology to support that service-based approach.
Gotcha. So let's talk about technology a little bit. I've got a background in the world of 3PL, 4PL, intermediation, all of the things that we like to call it. And it certainly seems like the company that has technology that is moving the ball forward really is at advantage. There's a lot of digitization of freight being discussed and but how has technology, what have you done, and where are you investing in technology to continue to enhance the customer experience with Lange Logistics?
Well, so I would say we were a little late to the game investing in technology as a 3PL, and we've worked very hard to catch up. And that's actually given us a nice opportunity to look at and embrace some of the latest technologies. So rather than starting with a legacy system, we got to kind of start from scratch.
That's really interesting that you say that, because some of those legacies, it's nigh on impossible to get off of it. But if you really are starting from scratch, there's almost an advantage to that. That's a fascinating way to approaching it. That's really interesting.
So and we brought our team into the evaluation process. So when we started looking at TMS software, we brought the users in, and they were part of the group that demoed and ultimately made the selection of our TMS system. So we're learning very rapidly how TMS can support us in driving customer satisfaction, carrier satisfaction, driver satisfaction, and end customer satisfaction, and how we can integrate that into our service philosophy.
So thinking about the third-party logistics and it being processes, technology, people, let's talk about your people a little bit. You mentioned that not being out in the field offices because of the pandemic. How are you getting back to that? Where are you in the progress of that? Are folks back in the office now? How's that evolved? I think that the hybrid model is the phraseology that's used, but there's something about having the group together servicing that particular account really helps out. How are you guys dealing with that?
So we, depending on our location, we had a number of methods where we handled the pandemic, from full remote situations to rotating schedules where we built teams and tried to rotate those in and out. There is a tremendous amount of synergy in our offices having people together, and that back and forth, yell over your shoulder, hey, I need a truck kind of banter. And that's hard to replicate when you're out of the office. So we tried to get back in and functioning as teams as soon as we could. We had individuals who were out, and so we found ways to incorporate them into that communication. So we became much better versed in Zoom and Teams and all of those fun other methods of communicating.
Yeah, Zoom, Teams, Hangouts. We figure out quickly who's not allowed to let Google inside of their world, and
exactly.
we've got that. So let's stay on the people topic a little bit. As you're growing, as the business is really moving forward, that need for people is going to be there. In our world of logistics and transportation and supply chain, and also thinking about your end-to-end supply chain, you've got to think about a variety of different skill sets that would come into the organization or come from college into the organization. Talk about how are you getting the best talent? Where are you finding the best talent in that wide-scale supply chain that you're trying to cover?
Okay. Well, at logistics, it's very similar to what's going on in the produce distribution side of the business. I mean, we're always looking for talented individuals in all of our marketplaces. I don't think there's ever a day that we don't have a sales position or a coordinator position posted somewhere. We've found that it's difficult to go out and recruit talent from other companies to bring in and expect to grow the business. So we've taken a more of a holistic development approach. So bring people in, let them operate in different job capacities and grow within the system and continue to give them more responsibility as they go through. We have been able to continue hiring all through the pandemic. We've added a number of jobs all across the spectrum. So that's been a very pleasant surprise through the whole pandemic.
That holistic approach is really interesting, getting the culture sort of indoctrination and become part of you. I would assume then that turnover is probably something that is relatively handleable, and as you talk about not bringing people in from the outside, not losing them would probably be a result of having someone feel like they're a member of the Tom Lange Group family.
Our retention rate is very good.
Yeah.
When we lose people, most likely it's that they just the fast-paced nature of the business and the 24/7 on-call piece doesn't match with their lifestyle, and we find that we try to let people know up front that that's part of the culture and the mentality, but you'll have people that doesn't always fit with. What we have noticed, though, is a shift in the way the business is handled. The days of cradle to grave handling of a truck, that seems to be on the decline. We're seeing a much more collaborative approach to the business where people are drawn out along function lines, carrier development, customer support, operations, dispatch, check calls, all of those type of things.
Right.
So we're seeing a much more collaborative approach developing, and that allows us to bring in people into the organization and let them experience the business through different roles and continue to take on responsibility.
Within the broad transportation world, you hear a lot of people who are managing companies talking about how the bidding process for a shipper, for a manufacturer to capture capacity has really been very active over the last 6 to 9 months, or during the pandemic with so much volatility. Is that something you're seeing in any of those specters, whether it be anywhere within the temperature-controlled or cold chain that you guys are so deeply involved in?
Sure. I mean, we do a fair amount of business in each side of it, so spot business and contract lane business. We have seen an increase in requests for Lange quotes, obviously in a volatile market. If any of those costs that you can fix on a shipper side or a receiver side, you would like to. So we've had to balance those to make sure that we can handle the business and meet the spot market as well as cover contract loads.
Gotcha. As that 3PL, are you actually managing some bids yourselves and for customers? And do you find any synchronicity between customers where you can actually put some of their freight together to help those movements be more efficient?
We're not managing the overall bid process for anyone at this time. However, we are always looking for ways to keep trucks moving. And so if we have one contract that has destinations that result in trucks being available to handle another contract, obviously we want to be looking at those continuous move opportunities.
The demand supply equation is as challenging today as it's ever been. Get your crystal ball out, if you could. What are you forecasting? What are you thinking about? What are you hearing from those shippers that you're working with? Is this a circumstance and a situation both in that refrigerated area and maybe in the broader market that you think is going to continue? It might wane, and I won't hold you to any of these answers, but there could be some wagering going on in the background with regards to what you say.
So from a crystal ball perspective, I would say that we see, at least in the near term, the next 12 to 18 months, that the demand for freight will outpace supply. I don't see a bunch of new drivers waiting in the wings to come out and support our industry. So that we have a real dynamic there that's setting up for some challenges over the next 12 to 18 months and potentially longer. And we'll need to be able to address that shortage in driver supply to be able to catch up with the curve.
Yeah. So as you think about that challenge on drivers, sort of going full circle here, and we've got these challenges in front of us. Do you see the industry, and boy, we've talked a lot about making things better for the driver. Do you see progress being made both within the cold chain to make the driver life better? Is the lip service that people like me have talked about forever, is that actually happening now? And if so, do you feel optimistic that we are going to be able to bring in enough drivers to be able to make this supply and demand challenge be something more manageable than what we seem to have today?
What probably is driving, making the driver's life easier on the road, a lot of it is the current supply and demand issue, right? So as we're competing against everyone else for trucks and drivers, the system is changing. If you have 5 pickups on a truck, versus someone that has 2 or 3, then the company would prefer to take that load, even if you're trying to provide incentives to have those pickups made. And we actively are looking for ways to make sure that we can be competitive in making multi-pick, multi-drop loads. But I think that's going to drive as much of that as anything else. Just the simple economics of simpler loads are a better return for the carrier and the driver. So there's definitely a push there.
Yeah.
As far as
go ahead. Yeah.
So as far as the pending supply of drivers, I haven't seen any research that really points to us addressing that on a large scale. So I think this is a problem we've lived with it. For the last 5-10 years we've been talking about this, and it looks like we're going to probably continue to live with it for the foreseeable future.
And you wonder, I could not agree with you more. And you just wonder, and I talk about lip service. Now that conferences, obviously we do a lot of virtual conferences, but now that in-person conferences are coming back, I'm sure that there'll be panels that talk about it. And just wonder, where will we see a breakthrough, and will a breakthrough be in technology of some sort? And to your point, the supply and demand equation right now, the amount of freight that's available out there, I can pick and choose my freight. When that changes, which at some point it will, it is a cyclical world. Maybe we'll go to a point, Rick, where the norm used to be that freight pockets were tight, but overall, the shipper was in control. It seems like that's flipped, and maybe that'll continue. I think
that we've been working towards a more balanced approach to that type of business, over the last few years, where you see trucks loading and coming into market for cross dock and redistribution there. So we're doing that on a number of markets today, and I think you'll see that will continue to be important as you look for ways to simplify loads. It's going to be important that you can consolidate it at source, and it's also going to be important to look at ways to simplify and consolidate the distribution side. How can we cross-dock products, maintaining that sense of urgency and that that timely nature of our deliveries.
So the Tom Lange Group, I think, sits in a really significant position. You've discussed the growth that you guys have had. As you're dealing with carriers, having that kind of longevity from 1960, having the kind of financial position that you're in, that really is something that's an advantage to you. How does that manifest itself in the way that you're able to work with your vendors and with your shipper customers?
Okay. It helps us in two ways. So, number one, the longevity, the length of time that we've been in the business, both transportation and produce distribution. Certainly, within that world, we're a known quantity. So for our folks that are out prospecting with customers and carriers, it helps that we're a known entity, that we're someone that's around, that's credible, that believes in holding everyone in our group to a high ethical standard. So it helps open doors. From the financial side, our balance, we have a very strong balance sheet, and that allows us to help our carriers. And we deal with a lot of small, either owner operators or, let's say, less than 20 truck carriers. And a big issue for them is cash flow. So we're able to help them through, we're trying to move everyone to ACH so they get their money faster.
Good.
We continue to use, comm data to get cash to drivers as quickly as we can. And we do have a variety of quick pay programs to help with that in that respect. So the benefit of that financial strength really helps us keep those carriers moving.
Well, it keeps those carriers moving, keeps them available to you, which if I'm a shipper that has cold chain needs, that has the need for refrigerated transportation, access through Lange Logistics, through the Tom Lange Group, would seem to be, I should be calling you guys to say, I've got some challenges. I'd like for you to look at my network and see where you can take some of that financial strength and that relationship with those carriers and put it to work for me, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. That's terrific. So I just wanted to sort of, as the folks like to say, I like to land the plane here, but I do think Tom Lange Group, you said, so well known inside of that portion of the industry, but ready for growth with what you have, what financial strength is there. Where do you think Tom Lange's 3 to 5 year, where do you think the business will evolve to? Or is it just going to continue to grow? Will it grow in certain mechanisms? How do you think that it will manifest?
It's going to continue to grow organically.
Right.
That's definitely where our focus is, and we have strategy built around that. As far as expanding out, we're looking for opportunities all the time within that refrigerated frozen space. And I think we've carved out or developed a pretty good system, very good system for handling the. So we've developed a very good system for being able to meet the customer needs and provide the service level that someone needs moving in the food system. So I think you'll see us within, say, health and beauty products, fresh and frozen foods. Those will be the key areas where we'll have growth over the next 3 to 5 years.
Gotcha. So any particular area that if you could get into it, you're in health and beauty, produce and all, is there one that is out there in the refrigerated, in that temperature controlled world that you'd like to touch on, or are you touching on
there's not
everything?
there's not one in particular.
Right.
I think what will help drive us in the future is going to be that shipper and receiver need, and that may morph into in-market warehousing.
Right.
We're seeing more need for just-in-time deliveries. So we're seeing, as people's inventory challenges change, because we live in this fast-paced world of perishable foods, we're able to adapt pretty quickly to be able to meet those needs. And I think that's where we need to be focusing is, as people's supply chains are challenged, where can we step in and use our expertise and our service to meet that need.
That's wonderful. Meeting the customer's need, that's what it's all about. That's what the value is there. I want to thank you very much, Greg, for doing this. Greg Reinauer, the president of the Tom Lange Group. Thanks for being with us on this supply chain update. I think the Tom Lange Group, for those of you who know about them, is a company that you're going to continue to use and get value from. And I appreciate this update to bring us even more attention to great companies like this within our space. Enjoy the rest of your day.